It's the weekly 30/30 list on the ASX. We're looking at the top momentum companies over the last quarter and the top companies on the launchpad. These are companies whose momentum has improved significantly over the last week. Gary has been through the list and pulled out his favourite charts for us to go through. Good morning, Gary. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Chris.
We've got the chart after the Easter long weekend. There's a fair few trades that have shot out here, a lot of small caps, but that could be a function of markets or higher volumes in them. What are you seeing in this week's list?
Yeah, there's a few golds on the list. Obviously, gold's had a pretty good, decent run there. So, number one is a small cap gold there. Besragoldinc, I think, WMG. Number two, I thought that was one that was interesting here just because it had pretty big volume go through, but pretty hard to trade, something like that. The first one that I thought was interesting here was this Mindax Limited MDX, which is traded, it's now got a market cap of about 408 mil, so it's got a bit of size to it now. This is in that gold and iron ore space. Insiders hold about 52% of the shares here, Chris, so really tightly held, so hard to get stock. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it has run up a bit. But yeah, been a pretty strong run here so far for a very new company. So probably you just want to sort of see this have a bit of a breather, but this one's going on the watch list here just because of it's had such a strong run. It is tightly held, but we want to see this thing have a bit of a breather, and then see if it doesn't consolidate and give us a signal later on. 40X was sort of one that was on our list last week. I think it was on our launch pad there last week, Chris, had that one big day up, big volume. Always like when they have a big volume move like that, a big volume, but yeah, kind of tricky to trade, but yeah, getting a bit of momentum there. ALA, nice VCP in here, Chris. We had this we're sort of sitting under the high here. You almost, could call this a cup and handles, but perhaps, but also a little VCP in here just tightened up, and then we did sort of break out here on this day here, so would have been some nice volume, and would have been closing at an all-time high here on this day here. So nice little tightening pattern. You can see here no volume through this. See this little sideways retreat here? When we see a little handle there and there's no volume there, that's a good sign here.
And tight closes at the same time, right?
Yeah, nice. And that's that David Ryan sort of just seeing that congestion under the high there. So yeah, and then bang, nice little move there gone on. So I know it's a bit small, this one here, but yeah, classic sort of pattern there. So yeah, it's had a pretty good run here. So it's probably going to need a little bit of a congestion to cool off there, but probably just one to sort of keep an eye on. SMN was one just sort of to monitor there. It's had a pretty good move, pretty impulsive. Not too many chances to trade that one. I think IVR was sort of one. Again, had a bit of volume here. Definitely out of the box, maybe changing character there in terms of what we've seen so far. We haven't really seen it trade this impulsively or that sort of volume. So it'll be one to sort of keep an eye on, that Investigator Resources. RSG and Ramelius, I mean, they've had big moves, these gold stocks here. Some of the golds have really, really run here. So getting a bit long in the tooth here now, but as we know, these leaders they tend to lead and last a lot longer than we often think they can. So, if you long these things here, the key there with this, these positions there is just to sort of keep sort of edging your sort of stop high there, or have some sort of practice for getting out at some point there, whether you're trailing you could use something like a 2-day trailing stop, or a 2-week trailing stop, or you could use a moving average. Whatever you use, just be consistent. That's my advice for those out there asking questions around that. BRB has had a pretty good move as well, some decent volume. Bit of a change of character there with a volume through there. Again, not too much chance for trade here. So we've got quite a few things really popping here on some decent volumes, Chris. hard to trade some of these there. There's obviously been only really one pattern there that had a consolidation and then give us a chance. But the key there is just to sort of circle these, highlight them, put them on your watch list, and then eventually we'll see a bit of a consolidation period. And then if you get a little sideways, a breather there, you don't see too much selling coming in, then that's the sort of thing we're looking for there. AZS is a good example here. You can sort of see this. Here's our sort of, and again, we've got a VCP in here. Perfect little VCP, almost little, little cup and handle here. So we've basically stayed nice and tight in here. And then, we've had, we've gone up here on okay volume and then pull back here in 1, 2, 3 days, then no volume there. And then we start to see volume come back in, and then we pop through the range here. So this sort of pattern here, this VCP, this tightening pattern, that's the one that we want to be, keep our eyes out for. And when you see the volume, you see volumes of line like that sort of come in. You saw some decent volume, come through here as well. This is sort of starting to get some, signs of accumulation.
And that's part of that change of character that you're talking about, is it?
Yeah, and then you're sort of, you're watching this to sort of break out here. So I mean, look, you see these VCP patterns. I mean, this might have been a little bit of a trigger here. It's obviously a nice little up day, broke a little, broke a couple of little swing highs on the way here. Broke maybe, if you trend line across the highs here, sort of small breakout. You're really looking for a bit of a B wave break, something a bit clearer. But again, we saw some decent signs there, congestion on the high and popping through. So they're all, they're all slightly different, but the VCP pattern is sort of what we're really looking for. That's a good sort of signal there. The other one there, which was interesting as well, is seeing that sort of high tight pattern as well, Chris. So we've had a pretty strong move here, and again, look at the volume through there. So normally you sort of see a move like this. So the first thought is, if we eliminated, everything to the right at this stage there, we'd be thinking, oh, this thing's run. It's probably extended too far. It goes slightly higher, but that's good volume up to that point there. Really robust, very strong volume coming in there, and it hasn't sort of come in at the end. It's sort of the big volume sort of come in early as well. When you see it coming at the end and exhaust, that's always it's always a worry. When you see it come in early here and accelerate big volume, that's a change of character there. So that's that's a good sign there. So what you're looking for with a lot of those stocks that I've already shown here, they've already had decent moves. We're now looking for a little pause. So looking for a little congestion. So looking for like a little A, B, C, high tight flag, little pullback in here. So this one here basically has had a little three-way pullback. So that's sort of constructive. Seen this sort of come to a new low. So in terms of your Elliott wave, that's your little C wave there. And now we're sort of starting to sort of improve here. So we've had a bit of a bounce, bit of a congestion there, struggling to go down. Okay, it's getting interesting here. What we want to see is a break above this level here, which we sort of got, didn't really follow through. It was actually pretty heavily traded day. So you might have triggered you a buy there, but you might have been worried about your position there. But if you had your stop probably at this point here, for me personally, I would have been maybe a cent or two under that level. But then once we're up here, then we can move our stop in a little tighter. But then that's just sort of kept going since then. So good little signs in there. We've had a move up here. As I sort of tell people asking about this sort of stocks running sort of 3 or 4 days after they sort of break, you typically sort of get, I reckon you get that sort of 3 or 4 days, and then they sort of cool off. So I think if you saw something move up really strongly over 3 or 4 days, I would be taking, me personally, I'll take partials. So I like to scale in a position. So I might start with a small position, add to it, and then on the scale out too, I like to scale out as well. That's when I'm trading at my best. That's generally how I like to enter and I like to exit as well, because then it sort of takes the pressure off you a little bit if you sort of manage to sort of sell some into sort of some pretty decent heat. And then you can, if it pulls back lightly again, you can basically potentially buy it back. If it starts to sell off a bit more aggressively, then you can sell the balance off, and you go, okay, well, I sold some near the high, I'll just sell the rest out not so high. the psychology of it doesn't eat into you if you've taken some good profits. It's good levels there. So it's all sort of I think by being sort of partially orientated there, it just makes it a little easier there. I know sort of people were asking about, someone sent a few questions about exiting trades, Chris, as well. There's a couple of, like, we've had a pretty good examples there with corporate travel and Flight Centre recently there, where we're sort of long some of those positions, and then there was some really good news came out and the stocks jumped up quite aggressively. So we might have had an original target which might have been exceeded or hit pretty early. I know a few traders reached out and say, what do we do? Should I have taken the profit early, or should I have held on? And again, I think if you're partials as well, so if you trade a little bit into that strength and then hold it there, generally for me personally, I generally stick by my targets and my stops, my risk reward analysis. If I go into a trade, it's always going to be at least 3-for-1 risk reward. If it's say 4 or 5, I stay bound by that. The only times I will sort of change is if there's been a fundamental change. So the Flight Centre there, that was a really good small acquisition there, which was sort of a bit of I think the market saw that as a bit of a game-changing event. So I might trade partials and I might hang on to the partial there and adjust my stop a bit higher here. Same with corporate travel, the sort of one that I recently sort of bought, had a nice move, looked pretty bullish, had a bit of a gap up there yesterday. So to me, even though that was a bit of a pretty solid announcement, Chris, probably a bit more, game-changing, this 22 was sort of, that's probably a bit of a level I'll be watching, just technically. So, my view was there to trade some of that into that move and maybe sort of hold the rest and just see if it can't push through here, see if it can't push on higher there. So generally stick by your rules, but if something does change, you've got to be willing to sort of adapt a little bit. But I think the answer there is if you're taking if you're sort of tearing out some at a time rather than all at a time, makes the decision process a little easier, because then it's not, you're
not wedded to trying to get the high or the low. You're smoothing it.
That's right. Yeah, it just makes this decision process a little easier, and then because then if it keeps going, then you don't feel bad that you've sold. You've still got some long, so you're happy. If it pulls back and then you have to sort of cut the rest, then you go, oh, okay, at least I sold some or half at the peak, So I know it's a bit of a psychology game here. Yeah, but the best traders will do that. They'll sell some of the strength there. I mean, if you watch Minervini's, I've watched so many interviews of his. He's actively taking some off into every sort of sharp rally there. If it sort of spikes up there, he'll take some off, even a little bit. So he's always sort of active in that regard. Where were we up to there, Chris? We had
Avita AVH and looked at that chart, pulled that one.
AVH, yeah. Okay, the next chart's actually pretty interesting here. This is WA1, which is, again, so we've had this WA1 Resources there was sort of one that was on our list quite a while back there, had a pretty sharp move. It's had a decent decline now. Big ABC on the daily and the weekly. And then we had this little move up here. I think it actually triggered on the launch pad there. I think it might have been last week. Had this little tight pattern, which we talked about. Pretty light volume on that pullback, and it has sort of jumped up here. So this is interesting for a number of reasons here now. We're sort of starting to get a bigger VCP potentially happening here, Chris, on the larger scale. So still in a downtrend, still haven't broken a swing high. So from a longer term picture, still sort of negative here. But if we congest back into the range here, maybe come back to 150, then start to build here and some volume starts to come in here later on, this potentially is a larger VCP pattern in the making. So definitely one that we want to put on our radar here longer term. STX I thought was the other interesting one here. Again, this sort of, we've got this little cup and handle here. See how it's had a nicer pullback here, but then it stayed pretty tight, and then it's kicked on through here. So this sort of congestion here under the high, not too much going on through here, pretty light volume through all that period there. Some decent volume on this way up here. you sort of, and even the pullback there, I think we had a nice strong. We saw some good volume come back in again pretty early here, then drift off, and then it's gone through here. So this little cup and handles there, just sort of something to watch out for there. That sort of stock showing some relative strength. I mean, this is all Darvis. This is all Darvis ever did. Was he just bought these things. So every time they sort of break to a new high, stock close a new high, he would just buy that break here. So just simple strategy there. That's sort of buying the breakout there. But yeah, when they congest under the high like that, nice and tight, that's pretty solid. That's our quarterly momentum list there. On our daily list there, I've got a few sort of stocks in there. I thought Linus was interesting here. Not sure how it made number one on the list, but it has had a bit of a pop here the last 4 days on this short week, and probably a nice percentage move from being a bit of a high beta stock. But yeah, this one's still in a pretty strong downtrend here. It is interesting here that we're sort of starting to see a little bit of some volume down here, so potentially watching for a change of character here, but still pretty early for Mind here. We want to see big change here yet, so haven't seen that yet. So I'll probably watch this one here, but definitely wouldn't be entering this until I see some more signs of strength there. And yeah, we're quite a few days away from seeing anything like that. DUN too small for me. It's had a bit of a tick up there, volume there. Looks okay, but just way too small. TGI is interesting. Again, probably still pretty small, but a bit more volume over the last few days. So not too bad. PRO, again, just quite a few of these smalls here really popping out of the range here. This one here, not so much volume there, so probably one for me not that interesting. PEK was sort of one that this has been on the list a few times there, Chris. That had that little VCP through here during the year, and then tightened right up, and then peeled through here, had a nice little pop, and then it ran quite nicely. But the whole thing there again is sort of sitting. Our weekly here is potentially a bigger VCP again. Maybe a cup and handles in here, a little deep so far, but definitely one to sort of keep an eye on there. Has one that has run a bit there. Decent volume through again on this side here, but yeah, probably the hand a little deep. What have we got there? AR3. Again, there's some decent volume through there again. So sort of quite a few of these things are sort of gapping up here, running. So hard to trade these things, but you want to just sort of see them sort of congest here. I thought this one here, not EMV. EMV's had a bit of a run, so a bit of a move there. But I did see, I think Craig Bricks had EMR on his little trader handle there, which I thought was pretty cool. This is a nice VCP. Definitely a strong stock showing relative strength. Had a bit of a pullback in here. Not too much volume through there. The only volume that sort of came in here was pretty much at the end, which almost signaled the exhaustion, and then it sort of climbed again here. There's some okay green bars in here, pulled back in here, just no volume through there at all. That's a nice little, that's our sort of, there's our sort of cup and handle in there. Don't come back less than 50% of the handle. And then what you're looking for, you want to see some volume start to come in here. So we started to sort of 2 days here starting to come in here. So, okay, so it gave you a little bit of a heads up. Maybe something's brewing in here. And then we've kicked through there. So it's a nice little move here so far. Yeah, again, people asking about this sort of 3 or 4 day rule. Look, again, you get a big move like that, 1, 2, 3, you might want to sell some of it in there, but probably still want to be holding some case it goes on there. That's probably not such a great bar, because that's a pretty heavy sell bar coming off a sharp move.
Big volume, biggest of that move, isn't it?
Yeah, so that would definitely have me tightening myself up here. And yeah, but yeah, I mean, these patterns they're sort of VCPs. I mean, you can see they're pretty explosive there, pretty quick. So the key there is to take a little bit off. Try and stagger in, try and stagger out, try and take some off, take the pressure off your trading there. then you can give yourself a bit of room for it to be right. Because plenty of times there you don't take any off. The first little shimmy back, you get scared and you take it off, and then next thing you know, it turns up, goes straight up where you thought it was going to go in the first place. So if you can take some pressure off your decision making, there, it does help with the trading here. You know, I thought this was pretty interesting here. Just because we've had 3 decent days off here, off the low, and pretty decent volume. So really want to just sort of watch this one here and just see if we can see some sort of counter move here. On that other one, Chris, that EMV has had a decent move here. The volume was pretty good at the low. The thing I like about it here, actually, there's a bit of a false break there. It looks better on the weekly setup, this EMV as well. So that's sort of had a pretty time-consuming pullback after an impulsive move. Used up plenty of time here. It's now come back, retested that low, and there's a bit of volume finally coming at its low here. So we've got a bit of a false break here after a fairly large, fairly time-consuming pullback, and it hasn't come back all the way back as well. So that looks quite good on the weekly setup there. So that's sort of, sometimes you look at these. I'm mainly sort of presenting dailies here. I personally would look at all these on a weekly basis, the longer term frame, just to make sure they look good on there as well. But yeah, if the weeklies and the dailies all stack up there, that's a bit of a bonus as well. NIC is just a wait and see. RDT, not bad here. Just seeing some heavier volume off the low. Still a pretty decent downtrend. We do have this false break here again, Chris. So we've gone to a slight year low. Didn't stay there long. We hadn't sort of seen some volume coming there. So that does look quite good there. Again, if we look at our weekly, so right, that looks even better on the weekly there, because we've sort of come back just slightly below that level.
It's near that old high back in 2020, isn't it?
That is that old high there, which is sort of where that last one bounced from as well. So it sat on top of that old high, which is, I love that. So I sort of come back here again. So definitely one to watch here. But yeah, do like those bigger corrections in time there, coming back to retest the old highs and then start to see volume in there. So some good signs there as well. Now we talked about sometimes that looks okay on the chart there, but what don't we see there, Chris?
Well, there's a really dry period, January, February, March, really low volume. There's only one day where it's huge volume, which looks like it might actually be that climactic low, but there's no volume on that rally. It's huge range, low volume.
Yeah, that's right. So no volume on this rally here. It's sort of, those are rallies that often sort of fizz out. So I know this is a bit of a choppy, thinly traded stock here, but we can't trade stocks that don't trade much volume here. It's just there's no momentum going with it. They're the ones that historically will fail more often than not. So I could be wrong here, might keep going, but
the odds are not in its favour, are they?
Exactly right. So yeah, I mean we're sort of looking for high probability patterns where we're trading. It's a game of numbers here. So we're really looking at sort of we're talking about I've talked about basically staggering in and staggering out of positions there. That's just about probability of sort of taking a little bit off and making it easier for you. So it's the same with a lot of these sort of patterns there. Some will defy logic and go a lot higher, and some will sort of will tend to sort of go higher when they don't look like they will. But we just got to follow the odds. We follow the numbers, just follow the probability. Now, Lendlease has had a nice move here, Chris. Some good volume coming through there as well. We talked about home builders probably the last 2 weeks. We've been talking about this sector, how James Hardie, I think Lendlease, and quite a few of them actually sort of looking all right, and everyone's saying don't go near them. It usually is time to be sort of looking at them, and also sort of normally these stocks will find the low probably 6 to 9 months before the actual really low in the sector. Yeah, that's right. So you can't, if you're buying them at the low in the cycle, fundamentally, then you've missed it. I've already the stock market looks way ahead. So normally sort of the stock market's going to be sort of 6 to 9 months ahead. I'd say sort of normally sort of 6 months is sort of, that's always been the sort of phrase that everyone looks at here. But I think, with the advance of all the tools that everyone can get now, I think it's, people are even looking further ahead now as well. So, if the bottom of the cycle in this building cycle is the next 6 to 9 months, we may have just seen the low here. So,
so it's December, January next year, possibly.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. So if that's the low March, maybe the bottom of cycles, next, and we're seeing, builders default here now, so it's getting a little bit ugly out there. But yeah, it's just interesting there. People will typically won't go near these, and they'll only venture in once they feel more comfortable, and usually after the stock's rallied 15-20%. So
which it's looking like it's done. Well, on that,
yeah, that's right.
On that rise in there in March, if we just have a look at from the low where it dips down under $7, and it's slowly grinding up towards $7.50, it's sort of getting tighter, and that volume's dropping sort of between 20th and the end of March. Is that a positive thing to see that tight congestion and that volume tapering off not right on the low, but after it's come out of the low?
Yeah, so two things I like there. I like the fact that it has gone to a new low. This sort of false break here. Doesn't spend so much time, really only spends, maybe, a couple of days down below there. So good sort of false break here. There's some good volume, pretty much from here through to this low as well. So we're definitely seeing some signs of accumulation there. Through this phase here, volume definitely does dry up in here, but we just start to see, little mini high, but it's struggling to sort of go, this downtrend is now starting to sort of struggle to go down here. I think once it actually breaks up through here, this close here, what's that, the 11th of April there, closing at 754 there, it's just starting to show a little bit of strength, starting to get out of that range there. The volume increased as well. That's probably the first good sign there, sort of, if you're looking at this, I know some people might buy the false break, or might start with a small position there. Keep it nice and tight, and then, you can almost label this, Chris, as a 0, 1, 2, 3 pattern in here as well. So it's nice and tight, and then once we sort of break through that, away we go. So I think we saw with James Hardy, we had that nice little, little ABC. Didn't go down to a new low there, but this little ABC in here. Volume picked up here down this low, so it was interesting to see that big volume there. Then start to sort of climb here, and then really it's sort of broken out of this sort of downward trend here and start to build. And then the volume would have been a concern in here, not too much volume coming in there. But then you've sort of gone through a congestion and sort of struggled to go down. So that's why sometimes it's more important to sort of see the counter move. Watch and see how the stock moves against the counter move there, and then we're starting to edge up here and starting to break out here. So a bit slow moving, but looks quite good there. I mean, sort of Reece was, I think we talked about Reece a while ago. Again, that's sort of similar sort of pattern there. Just, once it sort of got out of the groove there, just sort of, started to move quite nicely. So the stocks can do that. PNR, I think number 23 on the list there. Probably, this is pretty small here, sort of tough one to recommend there, but when I see that big volume, Chris, it always catches my eye. Always makes me go and sort of circle these and say, hey, keep an eye on this. That's sort of change of character type of volume there. So this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Although that's probably a bit small for me. I haven't completely ruled it out just because of the volume is a change of character. IPX as well, some okay volume in there. Bit of a range bound trade here so far, but yeah, just one to sort of keep an eye on just because that volume's up. E25, interesting as well. Probably just a bit more volume in here. This is a downtrend all the way down there. Have finally just broken above that previous swing high there, so that could potentially be a change of character here, Chris, as well. So we saw some okay volume through here as well. So first time we've seen a bit of volume, and we've taken our swing high. So can't trade this yet, but definitely put this on the list there. Keep an eye on here. We want to sort of see this pull back here and congest, might even come back to, the lower right side here, maybe some sort of inverse head and shoulders, but this can come back in here and the volume dries up. We don't see too much aggressive selling there. Definitely want to keep an eye on there. So lots of stocks that are sort of starting to look pretty interesting. Lots of, there's actually lots of stocks there that I know they're a bit smaller there, but they're definitely showing some big volume through the market there. So avoid the ones with low volume, because they're the ones that often fail. The ones that sort of can kick on there are the bigger volume market moves there. So as I've seen some of those, I think that ALA there was sort of one that, that started with some pretty big volume there off that first move there, drew back in the range and then started to squeeze up under the high, little BCP, and then it's taken off here. So that's what we're looking for, a bit of a change in character. And then we want to see the tightening behavior, and then away we go. That's why you got to circle these stocks. Keep an eye on there, wait for that sort of congestion there. Hopefully look for your setup there. I mean, look, 3/4 of them are probably not going to set up ideally, but some of them will sort of set up and give us a setup there. So that's the key. So interesting period there. A few traders have asked me a few questions. I hope I've covered a lot of those today. But yeah, good luck with the trading, everyone.
They're great insights to go with the week. Thank you very much, Gary Glover from Novus Capital.
Thanks, Chris.
Gary's mentioned some of the trades that he's put on throughout the week. They're on his Tuesday report. That playlist is on the right-hand side. Also, some of those trading strategies, springs, false breaks, volatility contraction patterns, and the 0, 1, 2, 3 bottom. They're also in another playlist on the right-hand side. And to follow Gary, you can catch him on Twitter, where his handle is over there on the left.